The Afghanistan report that came out this morning from the Washington Post, and we like criticizing the Post, so I don't mind giving them credit. Apparently, they fought for 3 years in court through the Freedom of Information Act, which Jen and I have been fighting for a different story to get information released. So far, we haven't been successful in that, but the Washington Post has basically, how many more lawyers does the Washington Post have than us, Jen? Probably, I'd say, I don't know, 150 additional lawyers, and probably a budget of probably hundreds of millions of dollars more than us. So Washington Post was successful in this case. But the Washington Post fought to get this information out for several years, and finally they were able to gain access to this information. And the information basically shows that internally, the government, the Pentagon, and other agencies did an internal review of the Afghanistan war to essentially find out lessons learned, as they call it. And the lessons learned, ideally, they were going to learn these lessons so that they didn't make these same mistakes they made in Afghanistan in other countries that we illegally invade. So we've been in Afghanistan now, 2021 will be 20 years. So we're going on 19 years. Basically, we're going on 2 decades. So the top line of this report, the report started off by basically saying that, I'm not reading the whole report. It's really, really long, but I do have some major points. Saying a confidential trove of government documents obtained by the Post reveals that senior U.S. officials failed to tell the truth about the war in Afghanistan throughout the 18-year campaign, making rosy pronouncements they knew to be false and hiding unmistakable evidence the war had been unwinnable. The documents were generated by a federal project examining the root failures of the longest armed conflict in U.S. history. They include more than 2,000 pages of previously unpublished notes of interviews with people who played a direct role in the war, from generals and diplomats to aid workers and Afghan officials. The U.S. government tried to shield the identities of the vast majority of those interviewed for the project and conceal nearly all of their remarks. The Post won release of the documents under the Freedom of Information Act after a 3-year legal battle. In the interviews, more than 400 insiders offered unrestrained criticism of what went wrong in Afghanistan and how the United States became mired in nearly 2 decades of warfare. Quote, "We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan. We didn't know what we were doing." Douglas Lute, 3-star Army general who served under Bush and Obama, said in this internal review that Washington Post got a hold of. "What are we trying to do here? We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking. If the American people knew the magnitude of this dysfunction, 2,400 lives lost." He blamed the deaths on U.S. military personnel, the deaths of U.S. military personnel on bureaucratic breakdowns among Congress, the Pentagon, and the State Department. Since 2001, more than 775,000 U.S. troops have deployed to Afghanistan, many repeatedly. Of those 2,300 that died, and 20,589 were wounded in action. So, let me show you a couple parts that I just took out of this. Several of those interviewed described explicit and sustained efforts by the U.S. government to deliberately mislead the public. They said it was common at military headquarters in Kabul, Afghanistan, and at the White House to distort statistics to make it appear that the U.S. was winning the war when that was not the case. Every data point was altered to present the best picture possible. Bob Crowley, an Army colonel who served as a senior counterinsurgency advisor to U.S. military commanders in 2013 and 2014, told government interviewers, quote, "Surveys, for instance, were totally unreliable, but reinforced that everything we were doing was right, and we became self-licking ice cream cone." John Sopko, the head of the federal agency that conducted these interviews, acknowledged to the Post that the documents show the American people have constantly been lied to. Since 2001, the Defense Department, State Department, and U.S. Agency for International Development have spent or appropriated between $934 billion and $978 billion on Afghanistan. Let's just round that to $1 trillion. Okay? $1 trillion spent in Afghanistan. Those figures do not include money spent by other agencies such as the CIA and the Department of Veteran Affairs, which is responsible for medical care for wounded vets. And what did we get for this $1 trillion effort? Was it worth $1 trillion? Jeffrey Eggers, a retired Navy SEAL and White House staffer for Bush and Obama, told government interviewers. He added, "After the killing of bin Laden, I said that Osama was probably laughing in his watery grave, considering how much we have spent in Afghanistan." So, here you have, literally, for the majority of the Afghanistan war under Bush, Obama, now Trump, you literally have people having no idea what exactly we are at war for. Yet the interview shows that as the war dragged on and the goals and mission kept changing, and a lack of faith in the U.S. strategy took root inside the Pentagon, the White House, and the State Department. Fundamental disagreements went unresolved. Some officials wanted to use the war to turn Afghanistan into democracy, because we love turning other countries into democracies. Others wanted to transform Afghan culture and elevate women's rights. Still others wanted to reshape the regional balance of power among Pakistan, India, Iran, and Russia. Quote, "With the AFPAC strategy, there was a present under the Christmas tree for everyone," an unidentified U.S. official told government interviewers in 2015. "By the time you were finished, you had so many priorities and aspirations, it was like no strategy at all." What's incredible here, we went into Afghanistan as a response to 9/11. We went into Afghanistan because of bin Laden, even though all the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. And even though bin Laden was in more places than Afghanistan. But putting that aside, we go into Afghanistan, right? You can't find bin Laden, which was the expressed reason we voted for war in Afghanistan. So you have a U.S. military that doesn't even understand Afghanistan. In the reports, written in dense bureaucratic prose and focused on an alphabet soup of government officials, left out the harshest and most frank criticisms from the interviews. Quote, "We found the stabilization strategy and the programs used to achieve it were not properly tailored to the Afghan context, and successes in stabilizing Afghan districts rarely lasted longer than the physical presence of coalition troops and civilians," read the introduction to one report. I mean, you also have the U.S. policy. U.S. officials tried to create from scratch a democratic government in Kabul, modeled after their own Washington. It was a foreign concept to the Afghans, who were accustomed to tribalism, monarchism, communism, and Islamic law. Quote, "Our policy was to create a strong central government," which was idiotic because Afghanistan does not have a history of a strong central government, an unidentified State Department official said. The time frame for creating a strong central government is 100 years. This would essentially be like me going to the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in North Dakota, which I have very fond memories of, and trying to hunt buffalo. I have no idea how to hunt. I have no idea what the conditions of hunting in Standing Rock Sioux are. I have no idea anything about buffalo. And it ain't my place to go hunt buffalo in the sovereign territory of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. I don't know if that analogy makes sense to you, but that's the first thing that came to mind. Why in God's name? I mean, besides the most horrific part, 2,300 Americans dead, not to mention countless more Afghans dead, not to mention the Afghan veterans in America that have committed suicide, not to mention the people with PTSD, the family members who have suffered for this colossal waste. And I want to, this might seem like a bit of a strange pivot. I'd like to bring our friend Hillary Clinton into this because I think it's important. This was Hillary Clinton on Howard Stern last week when she was ranting and raving about Bernie Sanders. Here we go.
Bernie Sanders, and this was a perception I had.
Mm-hmm.
You would say a policy when you were running against him for the nomination.
Right.
And the next day you go, yeah, well, free college for everyone.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you run for a fifth grade class.
Right.
I'll give you free everything.
Chocolate milk for
everyone and more recess.
More
pizza. And then it makes it look like you're a stick in the mud.
I know. And then when you say, well, wait a minute, where's the money going to come from? Then what a minute, are you against free college? I know.
So apparently, Hillary Clinton, Howard Stern, in that interview, she also, lambasted Bernie Sanders. But apparently, where's the money going to come from? Where's the money going to come from? Where do we get this money for free public college? It's not only Hillary. Let's look at our friend Joe Biden here.
I think we should be in a position of taking a look at what costs are. My plan for health care costs a lot of money. It costs $740 billion. It doesn't cost $30 trillion. $3.4 trillion a year, it turns out, is twice what the entire federal budget is. That's before it exists now, without interest on the debt. How are we going to pay for it? I want to hear tonight how that's happened. Thus far, my distinguished friend, the senator on my left, has not indicated how she pays for it. And the senator has, in fact, come forward and said how he's going to pay for it, but it gets him about halfway there.
Well, we make $1 trillion we spent on this ridiculous, wasteful, absurd, immoral war in Afghanistan. $1 trillion we spent. All the while, government officials in the Pentagon, the CIA, are altering documents, are altering facts, are lying to us. Why? To keep us there. Why are they keeping us there? Who the hell knows? It's all part of the military-industrial complex to grease the skids of Raytheon. Well, Hillary, Joe, and the rest of the neoliberal order, I could tell you what we could use that. I don't know. I think I know how to pay for free college. Here you go. War in Afghanistan, according to these estimates, $978 billion, gives us 12 years of free public college. $80 billion a year is Bernie Sanders' plan. 12 years of free public college we could have had with what we've spent in Afghanistan. How about 7 years of universal pre-K? Studies show costs about $140 billion a year. Could have 2 years of universal basic income, $12,000 a year to every person in this country. 2 years of a universal basic income experiment. How about replacing lead service lines so that our water isn't poisoned like in Flint and elsewhere? Well, I mean, we could have done that, I guess, in the first half year of the Afghanistan war. I mean, I didn't have all day to go through the list, but I could find you even more examples of how we could pay for these things. How the money is already there. And by the way, I don't even believe in this how do you pay for things argument. I don't subscribe to this how do you pay for it argument. I believe in modern monetary theory, which slowly more people are getting in tune to. But I'm just saying these are all under the current confines of what's to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Well, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, why is it that we only ask how you're going to pay for it when it's for the moral things like healthcare and education? But we don't ask, how are we paying for, or why are we paying for this absurd war in Afghanistan? this lie in Afghanistan. You wonder why I say, and Ben Norton says, and Max Blumenthal says, and Glenn Greenwald says, and Abby Martin, and Rania Khalek, and Jimmy Dore, and Kyle Kalinske, and keep going. Well, no, I don't believe what the government says, that Russia is, hacking our brains, and Russia swung the election, and Russia did this, and Russia's doing this. No, I don't believe it until they give me evidence. Because the U.S. government lied about Vietnam. The U.S. government lied about Iraq. And now we know the U.S. government has been lying about Afghanistan pretty much from the jump. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.